Brother Sean's making his way up here for our Sunday school, so he'll be up here in a second. How's everybody's week? Was it good?
Good. Busy.
All right. Yeah. We're starting off a new one, so now it's time to turn it around and make it not busy.
Do you awkwardly have YouTube on the whole time staring at an empty pulpit?
No, I was up there for like a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. All right. All right. Good morning, everybody. I've never done this early in the morning. This might not come out so smoothly this time. No. No coffee. If I was drinking coffee, I'd be in the bathroom a lot longer. We'll just put it that way. Yeah. No, glad you guys got to know that. Start out in 1 Chronicles chapter 2. This was originally a message I wrote probably about 5 or 6 months ago as a sermon, but I just wasn't getting anything for Sunday school, and I kind of went back over this. And Pastor Eric said I could preach if I wanted instead of teach, so it might be kind of a mixture of both, but I really would rather just teach this lesson. We're going to go over a man. I call this the life and times of Joab. So we're going to go over a man in the Old Testament by the name of Joab, and we get to know him and the things that he did and the lessons we can learn from it this morning. So we'll go ahead and open up in a word of prayer and we'll get started. Heavenly Father, I just thank you for this morning and the opportunity to come and teach and preach your word this morning. We do pray and ask you to be with Pastor and Miss Lisa as they're away on their anniversary trip. Help them to enjoy themselves and the time away. God, I pray to be with Bailey also this morning as he comes to bring your word. Open the hearts and minds of us so we can get what you have for us. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so 1 Chronicles chapter 2. We're going to go into who is Joab, because some of you guys, maybe you're not as familiar with the Bible, might not know who Joab actually was. So we're going to go into who he is. So we'll start out in 1 Chronicles chapter 2, verse 13. And 1 Chronicles kind of goes over I think 1 Chronicles kind of sums up what happens in 1 and 2 Samuel, and 2 Chronicles kind of sums up what happens in 1 and 2 Kings. But there's a lot of genealogy there, and genealogy is important, but it can also be kind of tedious. So we're going to go through just a little bit of this. So we're going to start in verse 13. It says, "And Jesse begat his firstborn Eliab, and Abinadab, and the second Shema, the third, and Nethaneel the fourth, Radii the fifth, Ozem the sixth, David the seventh." We all know who David is. At least hopefully we do. "Whose sisters were Zariah and Abigail, and the sons of Zariah were Abishai and Joab, and Asahel 3. And Abigail begot Amasa, and the father of Amasa was Jethro the Ishmaelite." So we see that Joab is the son of David's sister Zeruiah. And I find it interesting in here because most of the time when you'll see it addressed in God's word, you'll have somebody that says, like David, the son of Jesse. It'll mention he's the son of his father. But here it mentions that Joab is related to David through, Joab's mother, his David's sister. That's something you don't see a lot in the Bible, but that's something I noticed coming through here in 1 Chronicles. So we see who Joab is. He's David's nephew through David's sister. And we'll fast forward up here to chapter 11, also still in 1 Chronicles, but we'll go over here to chapter 11, and we'll see how Joab's what he says, Joab rises in the ranks. And a lot of it really, you can almost say it's because he's just related to David, but he did something to kind of get where he was at. So 1 Chronicles chapter 11, verses 4 through 9 here says, Then Saul, okay, I'm in chapter 10, that's why Saul should not even be mentioned in this. Chapter 11, verse 4, And David and all of Israel went to Jerusalem, which is Jabus, and the Jebusites were the inhabitants of the land. And the inhabitants of Jabus said to David, Thou shalt not come hither. Nevertheless, David took the castle of Zion, which is the city of David. And David said, Whoever smiteth the Jebusites first shall be chief and captain. So Joab, the son of Zeruiah, went up first and was chief. And once again, we'll stop here for a minute. Once again, it says Joab right here is the son of Zeruiah. It mentions his mother's name. I just found that there's nothing really more than that to learn other than that's just interesting. Usually, like I said, David, the son of Jesse, or, it talks about Isaac, the son of Abraham. It always mentions their father, but here it mentions his mother. Probably just to keep it in mind that Joab is related to David, and that's how. Verse 7, And David dwelt in the castle, therefore. They called it the city of David, and he built the city round about, even from Milo round about. And Joab repaired the rest of the city. So David waxed greater and greater, for the Lord of hosts was with him. So you see, David offered a reward. He offered a position, said whoever can take this city will be captain of the host. He'll be basically in charge of all the military that David has. And you guys are saying that at this point, Saul had been killed in battle. David had been anointed king before, but didn't take the throne until, Saul was dealt with. Well, now Saul's being dealt with. David's starting to gather his forces in the kingdom, which at this point is kind of divided and scattered, and, they're kind of looking for a leader, and some people are still following after Saul's house, even though Saul's gone. But more and more people are following David, and this is part of that. Joab kind of rose up in the ranks by taking this city for David's sake, and David offered him a reward. You take this city, you're captain of the host. This was a common thing back then. A lot of times it was you can marry the king's daughter, or you can have this position or that position if you whoever completes this task can do it. And that's what Joab did. So Joab rose up in the ranks of David's military by conquering the city of Jerusalem for David. So far, looking so good for Joab right now. He's rising up in the ranks. His uncle's the king. It looks pretty good, but we're going to see some of Joab's ugly tendencies here. He abused that power quite a bit and got away with some things as a result. Now we're going to flip back several books to 2 Samuel. We'll be there until the end. We'll be in 1 Kings, but 2 Samuel chapter 2. There's a lot of names here to keep track of, guys. I understand this might get a little confusing, but there's a lot of things we refer back to that first chapter of where we first went to, where David, we talked about who his brothers were, Asahel and Abishai, and his cousin Amasa. That will come into play later. Right here we see in 2 Samuel chapter 2, verse 23. And actually we'll go back a little bit, so there's a man named Abner that they were pursuing after. And Joab and his brothers were pursuing after him at this point. We'll see in verse 23 that Asahel had come to him. Actually, we'll go back in verse 23. Abner said again unto Asahel, Turn thee aside from following me. Wherefore should I smite thee to the ground? How then shall I hold up my face to Joab thy brother? So Abner's basically warning him, hey, don't do this. I'm going to have to kill you. And then I'm going to have to deal with your brothers too. But Asahel wouldn't turn away. So verse 23, howbeit he refused to turn aside. Wherefore Abner with the hinder end of the spear smote him under the 5th rib, that the spear came out behind him, and he fell down there and died in the same place. And it came to pass that as many as came to the place where Asahel fell, and stood down and died and stood still. So a lot of people died with him there too, but Asahel, Joab's brother, got killed by Abner. And Abner, I believe, if you look back, he was basically, as I said before, some of the house of Saul was still trying to run the kingdom. Abner was part of the house of Saul. I don't know if I wish I would have went back and did research a little bit more, whether he was an actual relative of Saul or just part of his army or part of that. But either way, he was trying to keep the kingdom together for Saul's sake. Well, Saul's gone. And they were pursuing after him. And that's kind of why. They were saying, they're saying, hey, if whoever's not, obviously, if you're hostile to David, he's not going to let you live. But David's brother Asahel pursued him, caught up with him, and was killed as a result. So we go to 2 Samuel, go to the chapter 3, verse 23 there. We can pick up the story. I'm trying to paraphrase for sake of time. I hope maybe it don't end too early. But so verse 23 in chapter 3, it says, when Joab and all the host was there with him, they were come and told Joab, saying, Abner the son of Ner came to the king, and gone and sent him away, and he's gone to his place. So basically, Abner at this point, he got tired of the fighting and basically went to David and said, how about a truce? How about I serve under you? How about, I'll go ahead and we'll make peace. We'll call it even. I'll lead armies, and I'll serve you, David, instead of Saul. Imagine how Joab probably thought about that. You killed his brother. But at this point, this is where Joab's got to realize, do you follow your feelings and avenge your brother's blood, what happened, or do you follow the king's orders? Because David ordered him. You'll see here in the text, and like I said, once again, it's been a while. I wrote this thing up several months ago, and I went over it this morning, but I wish I would have took more time. But David kind of gave an order, okay, well, he's mine, don't touch him. It's all said and done. You can imagine how Joab would feel about that. So what does Joab do? So verse 24, then Joab came to the king and said, what hast thou done? Behold, Abner came unto thee. Why is it that thou hast sent him away, and he is quite gone? Thou knowest Abner the son of Ner, that he came to deceive thee, and to know thy going out and thy coming in, and to know all that thou doest. So basically, Joab's trying to tell him, look, why are you trusting this guy? How do you know he's not going to turn on you later? And I don't know, Joab might have been right with some of that. Let's face it, can you blame a guy if he has a hidden agenda there too? He's not, Abner could have been, at that point, turned over a new leaf and been the best servant possible. Joab wasn't going to see that because his brother's blood is on Abner's hands. So then, verse 26, and when Joab was come out from David, he sent messengers after Abner, which brought him again from the well of Sirah, but David knew it not. So Joab's, okay, I'm going to take matters in my own hands. I'm not going to let David know about this. Let's do this in secret. What's done in secret is not good, right? What's the Bible tell us later? Man loves darkness rather than light. This might not have done in literal darkness. It might have done at night. I don't know. It doesn't say. But the point was, is he did this behind David's back. Verse 27, and when Abner was returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside in the gate to speak with him quietly, and smote him there under the 5th rib, that he died for the blood of Asahel his brother. So we see here Joab took matters into his own hands. Said, all right, you killed my brother, I'm going to kill you. Tooth for a tooth, an eye for an eye. And maybe justice to a point demanded that, but the point is David gave out a clear command. So really that's on David. That's a tough situation to be in, but let's face it, was Joab in the right to disobey the king's order? Probably not. Can't blame the guy for feeling that way. We know feelings don't always, actually a lot of times they're not right. They tell us to do things that aren't right. Verse 28, and afterward, when David heard it, he said, I and my kingdom are guiltless before the Lord forever from the blood of Abner the son of Ner. Let it rest on the head of Joab and upon all his father's house, and let there not fail from the house of Joab one that hath an issue, or one that is a leper, or one that leaneth on a staff, or that falleth on the sword, or that lacketh bread. So Joab and Abishai his brother slew Abner, because he had slain their brother Asahel at Gibeon in the battle. So we see kind of Joab took matters into his own hands. We see that David's kind of like going, all right, my hands are clean in this. I told him not to do it. He did it. That's on you. So from there, we'll go ahead to further on in 2 Samuel. We're going to skip over to chapter 18. This is a story that's maybe a little more familiar to some people. Turn a little too far. So at this point, and this was done directly because David had sinned with the woman Bathsheba. He had taken, basically had an affair with Bathsheba, who is the wife of one of his greatest warriors, Uriah the Hittite. And then he sent, I should have wrote down the verses for this one too, and I didn't, to go over. But basically, he sent a letter to Joab, and Uriah the Hittite's own hand, which was sealed so Uriah wouldn't read it, that said, send all the men on the front lines, have them retreat from Uriah, and let him get killed on the front lines, so he wouldn't have a clue what he just did with his wife. And of course, David got caught. God had punished David for it. But later on, the curse was now on David's house because of this. David wasn't perfect this time before. He had committed some sins before, but this was so serious that this caused David to lose the kingdom for 7 years from his son Absalom through a sick affair in David's own house. And David had to retreat for 7 years. Of course, with David was his men, Joab, one of them, stuck loyal to David. And it's weird because this time David gave a clear command to Joab that Joab actually knew this was wrong. This was just flat out wrong. There was no gray area here. He told Joab, set up Uriah up to get killed. Joab didn't seem to have any protest at all in committing this one. He said, oh, okay, I'll do it. Didn't question it. It's funny because when it came to his own personal vendetta, he had no problem going against the king's orders. But this wasn't a personal vendetta, so he obeyed David unquestioningly. And like I said, yeah, I wish I would have went over. I'm sure I can find that story if I want to, but like I said, we're going to move on here. But anyway, so Absalom now at this point has the kingdom. He's in control of the kingdom for 7 years before David finds a way to take it back. So we'll go to 2 Samuel chapter 18 and verse 5. It says, and David went out whithersoever Saul sent him and behaved. Wow, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong. How did I end up in 1 Samuel from 2 Samuel? I'm sorry, guys. This is 2 Samuel. You guys are in the right place, and I'm not. That's better. 2 Samuel chapter 18, verse 5. And the king commanded Joab and Abishai and Ittai, saying, deal gently for my sake with the young man, even with Absalom. And all the people heard when the king gave all the captains charge concerning Absalom. So David gave a clear command that points out that everybody heard him. It wasn't like David just quietly took them to the side and said, guys, don't kill him. He's my son. Don't hurt him. I know he's done wrong, but don't do that. No, he said this in clear command to everybody. So probably everybody could hear this command. He spoke to his main captains, but I think he wanted this to everybody to know, don't hurt him, he's my son, despite what he's done. We'll skip down to verse 9, of the same chapter. And Absalom met the servants of David, and Absalom rode upon a mule, and the mule went under the thick boughs of a great oak, and his head caught hold of the oak, and he was taken up between heaven and earth, and his mule that went with him was under him went away. So Absalom's stuck in a tree by his head. You know, and so he's just hanging there. He's kind of helpless. I always wonder, like, did his hair get caught? You know, he said Absalom supposedly had long, beautiful hair. I wonder if that was what did it. But either way, he's hanging there in a tree and he's helpless. He's just hanging there. Verse 10, and a certain man saw it and told Joab and said, behold, I saw Absalom hanging in an oak. So now Joab knows. Some of you guys, if you probably don't even have to notice a pattern to know what happens next, but we'll go through it. And Joab said unto the man that told him, and behold, thou sawest him. Why didst thou not smite him there to the ground? I have given thee 10 shekels of silver and a girdle. So Joab's offering him a reward. Why didn't you go ahead and kill him then? Why are you coming telling me about this? I'll pay you to do it. Verse 12, and the man said unto Joab, though I should receive 1,000 shekels of silver in mine hand, yet would I not put forth mine hand against the king's son. For in our hearing the king charged thee and Abishai and Ittai, saying, beware that none touch the young man Absalom. The man's reiterating the King David's order. We were told not to touch him. He's the king's son. You know, no matter how much you pay me, I'm not going to disobey the king. And of course, there's a lesson to learn out there. How many times there seems to be a bigger reward in disobeying God and going against his word, even though God has a clear command. Tells us not to do certain things, but, and I've fallen prey to this. We all have, I think, to a point. Go out and hang out with these people and go and drink things and do things you're not supposed to do just so you can fit in with them. There's a reward there. But these men had the character, you know, Joab's you can almost see him in the place of Satan doing this. But these men are saying, no, no matter how much you pay me, I'm not going to go against the king's order and touch his son. I'm not going to do that. Nope. And it's important to note, somewhere back in here, Absalom did do something to like one of Joab's fields. He burned it. He torched it. He destroyed some of his property. I don't think he actually killed any of Joab's family, but he went after some of Joab's stuff. You know, and how we take it, Kyle, I know you got some land. I don't know how much land you got out there in Marshallville, but, you know, one of your neighbors comes and, like, you know, say, burns that shed of yours or burns your kids' play, you're not going to be too happy about that, are you? It might not be the same as hurting somebody in your family, but it's still, they violated you. Not going to be too happy about it, are you? I don't know much. I keep hoping someone torches my car because the thing's a piece of junk, but, you know, but still, I get that. At one point, you know, back in the day, my dad, believe it or not, we had 5 acres of land in Barberton. There's a spot along the river where a lot of it was flood control, so they couldn't build a lot. And we had people come down there all the time with their dirt bikes because we're between Barberton and Castle Holmes and Kenmore, and Castle Holmes really isn't much different than Barberton. They're a bunch of hillbillies that live in a city. You know, no offense to those of you who live in Barberton, but it's let's face it. You know, I'm saying it because I'm one of them. But they'd come down there and tear up the field, and they'd break things, and we constantly were chasing them off. And, okay, no, they never hurt me. They never hurt my dad. They threatened my dad a few times. They never really threatened me. They left me alone, but they always destroyed the property. And it is. You felt violated. Like, we have a boundary. You crossed it. Absalom had destroyed some of Joab's property. Said they think he burned one of his fields. Once again, I wish I would. I don't know what I was thinking when I wrote. I wish I would have wrote more of this down, but where he did this. But yeah, he did. He burned some of Joab's fields. So Joab basically now has an issue with Absalom, aside from the fact that he's probably also had to be on the run with his uncle because his own cousin's taken over the house and taken over the kingdom, and you can see how Joab probably, as they say nowadays, it makes him feel some kind of way about him. So we'll start over here in verse 13. Once again, the young man's, the soldiers are reiterating to him, though, David gave a clear command not to touch him. So otherwise I should have wrought falsehood against mine own life. For there is no matter hid from the king, and thou thyself would have set thyself against me. So verse 14, then said Joab, I may not tarry thus with thee. And he took 3 darts in his hand, and thrust them through the heart of Absalom while he was yet alive in the midst of the oak. And 10 young men that bare Joab's armor compassed about him, and smote Absalom, and slew him. So you can see here, Joab once again took matters into his own hands, disobeyed the king's orders, and killed the king's son. Despite what you might even say, maybe justice demanded. Absalom did some horrible things in the kingdom. He brought shame to David. He committed sins right there on the rooftop. I'm not even going to go into that, of the house of David. But either way, David gave a clear command and Joab disobeyed it. Killed the king's son Absalom. We'll go over here to chapter 19, verses 5 through 7. We'll see how Joab dealt with David's grief involving his son. Actually, we'll go ahead and start in We'll start in verse 1 here. We'll start at the beginning of the chapter, actually. It says, And it was told Joab, Behold, the king weepeth and mourneth for Absalom. And the victory that day would turn into mourning unto all the people, for the people heard say that day how the king was grieved for his son. And the people gat them by stealth that day into the city, as people being ashamed steal away when they flee from battle. But the king covered his face, and the king cried with a loud voice, O my son Absalom, O Absalom, my son, my son. So you see here the people, they're celebrating the things they've made right in the kingdom, that everything's back to normal, but they also realize the king's son's dead. So it's kind of a mixed feeling here. The people, they're also grieving. One of the princes was killed. David's mourning him, so the kingdom mourned with David. But Joab wasn't mourning at all. We'll see. His response was quite, I hate to say this, but he's kind of insensitive, really. After all, he is the one that did it, so we shouldn't be surprised here. But in verse 5, Joab came into the house to the king and said, Thou hast shamed this day the faces of all thy servants, which this day have saved thy life, and the lives of thy sons and thy daughters, and the lives of thy wives, and the lives of thy concubines, and that thou lovest thine enemies, and hatest thy friends. For thou hast declared this day that thou regardest neither princes nor servants for this day. I perceive that if Absalom had lived, and that we all had died this day, then it had pleased thee well. Now therefore arise, go forth, and speak comfortably unto thy servants. For I swear by the Lord, if thou go not forth, there will not tarry one with thee this night, and that will be worse unto thee than all the evil that befell thee from thy youth until now. He's really blowing this out of proportion. He's basically telling David, oh, so you're mourning after your son that overthrew your kingdom and sent you on the run for 7 years, and now that we're back and all you can do is sit around and mourn him? It's like you might as well, and Joab actually said once again, I think he's being for a bit of a drama queen at this point. He said, no, you'd rather that Absalom was still alive and all of us that just saved you would be dead instead. Is that what you want, David? And then he's even telling him, you know what, if you don't go out and you don't go to be with the people that are celebrating that were good and everything's been made right, and you don't go out and mingle with them instead of sitting here grieving, they're just going to turn against you. And the amount of evil they're going to bring against you is way worse than anything else you've faced before up to this point. In a nutshell, that's what he's saying here. I mean, he's almost threatening his own uncle, the king, and saying, you don't do this, you don't comply, things are not going to they're going to be pretty bad for you. Like I said, insensitive. He lost his son. He's mourning, he's grieving. I'm sure David wasn't happy with what his son did either. But I think he'd rather have, maybe took Absalom into custody so he'd at least still be alive. Maybe he could be restored at some point. Once again, Joab took matters into his own hands. He rebuked David's grief. Definitely out of line, but I guess maybe because he thought it's my uncle, it's my family, maybe I should just go ahead and feel free to do this. We'll see. Joab, he ain't done killing people yet. So we're still in chapter 19, We're going to go to verse 13. Now, this is where, if you recall back, David's other sister, Abigail, I'm pretty sure this Abigail is different than the one that David later married after he killed her husband. But David had a sister named Abigail who had a son named Amasa. That would make him, Amasa Joab's cousin. We're keeping the family tree straight here a little bit. Yeah, I said there's a lot of names and things to remember. So verse 13, once again, 2 Samuel chapter 19, verse 13. I'll go back to starting verse 12. It says, "Ye are my brethren, ye are my bones, ye are my flesh, wherefore then are ye the last to bring back the king?" This is David talking to his servants, and he says, "And say ye to Amasa, art thou not bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh? God do to me, and more also, if thou be not captain of the host before me continually in the room of Joab." I think David at this point kind of had enough of Joab. Of course, he didn't want to go all the way and kill Joab either. That is his nephew. Probably similar how he didn't really want to kill his own son. He didn't want to kill his nephew either, but he said, I'm done with him. He's killed people I told him not to several times now. He won't listen. Now he's rebuking me for killing my son, his own cousin, because I'm grieving for it. So I'm going to remove him. I'm going to put Amasa in his place. Now, noticing Joab's pattern of behavior before, probably guess what's going to happen next. So we're going to go to chapter 20, verse 9. And, Joab said to Amasa, "Art thou in health, my brother?" And Joab took Amasa by the beard with the right hand to kiss him. But Amasa took no heed to the sword that was in Joab's hand. So he smote him therewith in the fifth rib. It always seems to be hitting, I think he hit Abner in the fifth rib. Absalom, he got through the heart. Made me wonder if there's a little more, there's some kind of symbolism in that. I don't know, but he got Abner in the fifth rib, so now he's got Amasa in the fifth rib. And shed out his bowels to the ground. That's kind of graphic, That's kind of brutal way to die, too. Shed out his bowels to the ground and struck him not again, and he died. So Joab and Abishai, his brother, pursued after Sheba and the son of Bichri. So Joab took matters into his own hands once again. Joab basically he didn't like competition. It was, okay, so this man's going to take my place. I'll deal with that. Joab knew how to deal with that at this point. It's not the first time he's killed somebody over a personal vendetta. And really, as far as I can tell, and I've read in the scripture before, I don't think Amasa, he probably was the most innocent one he killed. You can make a case for Joab killing Abner, although it wasn't right, he disobeyed the king's order, but let's face it, we could put ourselves in his shoes and say, well, Abner killed my brother Asahel, so yeah, I'm going to go kill him. Joab killed Absalom because he destroyed his property and had him on the run for 7 years, and maybe to a point Joab thought he was doing David a service by doing that, even though he thought maybe he knew what was best for David better than David did, even though David's older than him. He's his uncle. He's the king. Amasa was just giving him his place, and really I think that was right. At this point, Joab doesn't listen to orders. He does what he wants. Doesn't want to listen. Wants to take matters in his own hands, act out of emotions, and take revenge. So David had him replaced. And Joab dealt with it, how Joab deals with it. As I say, Joab's going to Joab. He's going to kill somebody whenever you get in his way. So then we're going to do another I wouldn't say it's completely unrelated, but this is a different side of Joab we do see. 2 Samuel, we'll go to chapter 24. This might have been actually one of the, ever since probably the beginning, where it says Joab, where he rose in the ranks. This is probably something where actually Joab was in the right. Although at this point, giving Joab's history and everything he's done, in the kingdom so far, disobeying David's orders, why David probably didn't want to hear it at this point. But in 2 Samuel chapter 24, actually we'll start in verse 1. It says, "And again, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he moved David against them to say, 'Go number Israel and Judah.' For the king said to Joab, the captain of the host, which was with him, 'Go now throughout all the tribes of Israel, from Dan even to Beersheba, and number ye the people, that I may know the number of the people.'" So David's wanting to basically, as they say, take a census. Or back in Jesus' day, the Romans said it was to be taxed. Everyone's supposed to go to their hometowns so we can figure out how many people we have and where they're at, and you know, probably how many men, how many women, how many children, and so forth. And David's doing this probably to see how strong Israel is. What's Israel's strength? And because I've heard a lot of messages regarding this part where, why was this wrong for David to do? And it could be because maybe he's relying on his own strength and his own numbers rather than God's strength, who's gotten Israel to where they're at this point. I mean, you can think back to the story of Gideon and Judges, where God brings his army down to 300 people just to show that God will bring the victory, not the number. And I'm sure David, being a king of Israel and knowing the history and studying certain things, probably knew this. He knew probably the story of Gideon. I'm just assuming he doesn't say that, but I would assume that he would know that. But for some reason, David got in the flesh like we all do, did something he wasn't supposed to do. He wants to go number the people. For verse 3, Joab said unto the king, "Now the Lord thy God add unto the people how many soever they be, 100-fold, and that the eyes of my lord the king may see it. But why doth my lord the king delight in this thing?" Joab's going, "Why are you doing this? Why are you numbering the people? You know God's going to bring us a victory." It's kind of rich coming from Joab at this point. It really is. I mean, I don't blame David for not wanting to listen to him. But Joab was right. Shockingly. Number 4, notwithstanding the king's word prevailed against Joab. Oh, it finally did. Joab finally decided to listen to David even though he knew it was wrong. And that's where I know at this point I've hammered home the point where Joab should have followed the king's orders. He should have just stuck with what David said. But he didn't. He disobeyed. So why would it have been okay for Joab maybe to disobey this time? Because this is the point where it's David's word versus God's word, not David's word versus Joab's word. Now this is God's that Joab's defying instead over David. We should always obey God before man. But notwithstanding the king's word prevailed against Joab and against the captains of the host. So Joab must not have been the only one telling David, hey, this is not a good idea. Joab and the captain of the host went out from the presence of the king to go number the people of Israel. And if you read on further down, we know that God eventually does punish David for this by sending a pestilence amongst the people. He gave David 3 choices: to run from his enemies, or 7 years of famine, to run from your enemies for 3 months, or a pestilence that would kill people for 3 days before it goes away. David, of course, rightly decided, well, I'm going to rather be in the hands of the Lord than the hands of my enemies. So he chose the pestilence, and he did eventually cry out for God for mercy, and God was merciful to David. But we see Joab actually did try to caution David and tell him, hey, don't do this. And really, I think Joab at this point, if he was going to disobey David this time, it would have been in the right. Just like it would have been in the right had he refused to set Uriah the Hittite up to be killed. He didn't, but it seemed like the times when Joab should have disobeyed the king to follow God, he didn't do it. And the times he should have listened to the king rather than his own flesh, he followed his own flesh. Seems like it's pretty convenient for Joab to always be on the wrong side of everything. We'll see what happens at Joab's end. We're going to go to 1 Kings chapter 2. I have a hard time preaching a message and never somehow going back to either 1st or 2nd Kings. It's just, those are my favorite books of the Bible. There's a lot of history there. And there's a lot of good stuff you can learn from examples of kings of the Bible and the old kings of Israel and Judah. We're here at the beginning, 1 Kings chapter 2. Now this is where Solomon is now taking over the reign of the kingdom. David is on his deathbed. He appoints Solomon to be king. But Joab had followed somebody else instead, and made that was declared king before David appointed somebody. So David kind of wondered, I probably wondered at this point, well, Joab's got a history of rooting out competition and killing people he shouldn't kill. I don't want him to kill Solomon, so he's going to tell Solomon what to do about it. Verse 5, moreover, thou knowest also that Joab the son of Zeruiah did to me, and what he did to the two captains of the host of Israel, unto Abner the son of Ner, unto Amasa the son of Jether, who he slew and shed the blood of war in peace, and put the blood of war upon his girdle that was about his loins, and in his shoes that were on his feet. So he's saying basically that from head to toe, Joab is covered in the blood of these people. You know, he mentions him slaying Abner and Amasa. Doesn't say anything about Absalom, but I'm sure that's probably on his mind too. I mean, Solomon was actually born at this point. He kind of witnessed some of this. Verse 6, do therefore according to thy wisdom, and let not his hoar head go down to the grave in peace. At this point, they're all old. Even Joab's old, and David gives Solomon an order, maybe even a command. Kill him before he kills you, in a nutshell. So go to, in the same chapter, there in 1 Kings 2, we'll go to verse 28. We'll end with this. Then tidings came to Joab, for Joab had turned after Adonijah. Adonijah was the man that someone else had declared to be king over Israel before David could have a say in it. And Joab followed Adonijah. So Joab turned after Adonijah, though he turned not after Absalom. So it's weird. They said basically it's weird that he followed Adonijah, but not Absalom. He followed, when that situation went down. And Joab fled unto the tabernacle of the Lord and caught hold of the horns of the altar. And it was told King Solomon that Joab had fled into the tabernacle of the Lord, and behold, that he is by the altar. Then Solomon sent Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, saying, go and fall upon him. And Benaiah came to the tabernacle of the Lord and said unto him, thus saith the king, come forth. He goes, come on, you know what's going to happen. Joab, you had this coming. And he said, nay, but I will die here. And Benaiah brought the king word again, and saying, thus said Joab, and thus he answered me. And the king said unto him, do as he hath said, and fall upon him, and bury him, that thou mayest take away the innocent blood which Joab had shed from me and from my house of my father. And the Lord shall return his blood unto his own head, who fell upon two men more righteous and better than he, and slew them with the sword. My father David, not knowing thereof, to wit, Abner the son of Ner, the captain of the host of Israel, and Amasa the son of Jether, the captain of the host of Judah. And their blood shall therefore return upon the head of Joab, and upon the head of his seed forever. But upon David, and upon his seed, and upon his house, and upon his throne shall there be peace forever from the Lord. So Benaiah the son of Jehoiada went up, fell upon him, and slew him. And he was buried in his own house in the wilderness. So we see eventually David told Solomon to do what he wouldn't. Let's go ahead and finish Joab off. He can't be trusted. He doesn't listen to orders. He always does wrong. Let's go ahead and finish him. And that's basically what happened. So Joab eventually did die the same way, pretty much the same way he killed everybody else. He was killed himself. Wasn't allowed to go down to the grave in peace. I kind of question some of this stuff. Okay, what would he be a saved man? Which back then the Old Testament was different. Of course, they looked forward to the cross and the coming Messiah, where he looked back on it. But it makes me wonder sometimes. I'm reading this going, was this man a true believer? And the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the same God we worship today? I don't know. From his actions, doesn't look like it. He seemed to have head knowledge of God. He told David not to take the census. But it's something we can learn today. Joab always seemed to follow his emotions, follow what was convenient for him. As Christians, we're called to do the hard thing and carry the cross and die to our desires instead. That's the lesson we hopefully learn from Joab today. We'll go ahead and close in a word of prayer. We'll be on with our service this morning. Father, we come before you. We just